I am uncertain about what ultimately led to my breaking point. Perhaps it was the sound of a spoon clinking in an unusually quiet room. Perhaps it was the salt adorning the rim of the margarita glass. That moment will remain etched in my memory. How something so commonplace could resonate within me with such intensity. Before we proceed, allow me to revisit the beginning, as this narrative does not commence with sorrow. It commences with trust and the gradual decaying silence that ensued. My name is Corwin. Indeed, I am aware. Corwin is no longer a commonly used name. I have dedicated a significant portion of my 38 years to instructing others on the correct spelling. However, that is not a priority. 3 days ago, I exited a restaurant in Eastbridge, Pennsylvania, leaving behind a woman with whom I envisioned a future together. Lorna is 36 years old. She instructs high school literature, embodying a persona that incorporates the term emotional architecture into her daily discussions. She was able to recite a significant portion of Emily Dickinson from memory and once shared that she dreamed in metaphors. Our initial meeting took place 7 years ago during a volunteer cleanup initiative at a city park. I was present collecting beer cans. She was capturing images of rusted playground swings for an urban decay art project she was pursuing. I made a light-hearted comment suggesting that she might have perceived me as part of the trash, and she responded with a smile. The smile endured from our initial date, through our first apartment, and into our wedding day. However, at some point, it diminished. I was unaware of its significance until it was no longer present. Initially, it involved minor details. She ceased humming while preparing the meal. Her phone remained face down, consistently set to silent mode. She started employing terms such as disconnected and unsustainable when discussing our relationship, as if we were a failed scientific endeavor. I made an effort. I purchased flowers. She remarked that it seemed somewhat performative. I organized a weekend excursion. She canceled it due to a school board seminar. I inquired whether she would be interested in pursuing counseling. She indicated that therapy is ineffective when one individual is feigning progress while the other is struggling significantly. In some way, I found myself to be the one engaging in pretense. Subsequently, the dinner commenced. The concept originated from her. I would like to plan an activity with my family. She indicated that it could help us regain our stability. The word lodged in my throat. Please provide us with a solid foundation. We resembled two paper kites caught in a tempest. Perhaps her mother's roast chicken could ground us once again. At that moment, we found ourselves in a particular situation. Lorna, her parents, her brother Delmont, his 2 young girlfriends, Kay, and I were seated at a dimly lit table in an unusual fusion restaurant where the menu lacked prices. I spent the majority of the evening engaging in courteous conversation while attempting to navigate unfamiliar cuisine. No one inquired about my well-being. My presence went largely unnoticed, save for the moment I passed the salt. The journey commenced with the salt. Kay requested margaritas. All individuals present found it amusing. At just 21 years old, she exuded a level of confidence that suggested she believed she had pioneered the art of flirting. The waiter presented them garnished with salt and lime. At that moment, Lorna addressed her mother, her hand gently placed on her glass, and remarked, "Isn't it interesting? The sole reason I haven't submitted the papers yet is due to my concern that he might cry in front of everyone." I didn't fully comprehend it at first. I glanced at her, then shifted my gaze to the others. No one reacted. Her mother displayed a subtle smile. Delmont laughed as if it were the conclusion of a private jest. Even Kay expressed a subtle sigh, as if she empathized with the individual unaware that his marriage was approaching its conclusion. No one acknowledged my presence. In that moment, I assumed the role of the salt. Unseen and expendable, existing solely to enhance the flavor of another element. I remained silent and did not complete my beverage. I have just risen to my feet. I retrieved my wallet, placed 2 $20 bills on the table, and spoke just 5 words. Rest assured, I will remain composed. Subsequently, I exited the premises. I did not take the car. I have left it for her consideration. I traversed 4 miles through the city in footwear that caused blisters on both my heels, passing by closed stores and streetlights that seemed to hum with a critical tone. I arrived at a motel that had a strong odor of bleach, which was quite unsettling. I was unable to sleep. I found myself gazing at the ceiling, reflecting on each moment I had overlooked. I disregarded every signal each night. She expressed her fatigue and distanced herself from me, both physically and emotionally. Are you interested in learning about the subsequent events? The situation has deteriorated. Significantly more unfavorable. Following that evening at the restaurant, I chose not to return home. That evening was not suitable. The following morning did not occur. That will not happen again. The motel I entered was a rather dim and echoing establishment located off Route 27. A setting characterized by the prominent hum of the vending machine overshadowing the television, where each knock on a neighbor's door carries the potential of being directed towards you. I was without a bag, carrying only my wallet and phone, accompanied by an unexpected sense of relief that I no longer needed to maintain a facade. However, that sense of relief was short-lived, as silence tends to amplify the thoughts within one's mind. When you take the time to pause, every imperfection in your life becomes illuminated, resembling a fault line. The following morning, I reactivated my phone. I received 11 missed calls from Lorna. 2 brief voicemails. The first individual remarked, "Corwin, please refrain from being overly dramatic. It was merely a joke. Kindly return." The second individual spoke in a more subdued manner. "Understood. If you do not intend to return home, please send me a message to confirm your well-being." I did not provide a response. I did not listen to them more than once. I notified my employer that I was unable to attend work due to illness. I informed my supervisor that I was dealing with a family emergency. I am uncertain about the validity of that statement. In a sense, it seemed as though I was the urgent matter at hand. A figure in disarray, an understated eruption in khaki trousers, and a dress shirt that seemed detached from any tangible reality. That afternoon, I engaged in an activity I had not pursued in many years. I accessed an older laptop stored in the trunk of my vehicle and retrieved our shared cloud account. It was an arrangement we established early in our marriage to facilitate the synchronization of grocery lists, travel photos, and tax documents. Lorna seemingly did not take the initiative to shut it down. Alternatively, it is possible that she overlooked its existence. It is possible that she intended for me to discover it, as upon accessing the folder titled Work 2024 Presentations, I encountered a concealed subfolder. The name chosen was Always Us. Initially, I perceived it as something charming. It is possible that she created something for our anniversary but chose not to share it with me. However, I acknowledge that I was mistaken. Contained within were numerous images, screenshots, notes, and hotel receipts. A video that was fortunately blurred and silent, yet still conveyed its implications with unsettling clarity. She and another individual. Not merely a singular occurrence. Not solely in recent times. Negative response. This situation has persisted for more than a year. I observed a photograph featuring Lorna alongside an unfamiliar man, seated at a beachside restaurant that appeared to be in Miami. Her hair was elegantly styled and secured. She was wearing a dress that I had previously complimented her on, which she mentioned purchasing for a friend's wedding several months ago. The timestamp on the photo indicates that it was the weekend she mentioned attending a teacher development retreat. A profound sense of despair enveloped me. My stomach experienced a sensation akin to folding in on itself. My hands became cold, yet I refrained from throwing the laptop. I refrained from screaming. I did not exhibit any tears. I chose to review each note she had composed for him. Statements such as, "He believes I'm spending the weekend with Abby. It's amusing." At times, I question whether Corwin even realizes my absence. "We have a family dinner scheduled for Friday. I may take the opportunity to gauge his reaction. Perhaps I'll make a bold remark and observe his response." That particular one. That concluded the matter. The dinner has concluded. I was the one responsible. She assessed the situation. I departed the situation as if I were a laboratory subject. She prompted with subtle emotional cues. However, the most concerning aspect is, concealed within a note dated merely 3 weeks prior to that evening, she documented, "I no longer experience any emotions when I see him. I anticipated experiencing guilt or pity, yet I find myself feeling nothing at all. I believe that concerns me more than if I held animosity towards him. Are you curious about the experience of being characterized as blank by the individual with whom you create a home? The experience transcends mere heartbreak. It is a complete devastation. I remained in that motel room for several hours following that event. It was not due to a lack of understanding of the necessary actions, but rather an awakening to the duration of my previous ignorance. The number of signs I overlooked, or more concerning, how many I observed and opted to overlook. Remarkably, I found that I still did not harbor any animosity towards her. I found it regrettable that I allowed myself to become an unnoticed, inconsequential element in another person's narrative. On that evening, I secured a long-term rental using an alternate name. Compensation was provided in cash. The space was modest, featuring unadorned walls and an assortment of mismatched furniture, a location that would not typically draw attention to my presence. Subsequently, I commenced the planning process. Neither revenge nor drama, but rather a subtle and conclusive resolution. The concept emerged during a period of restlessness and discomfort. At approximately 3:40 a.m., I found myself gazing at the popcorn ceiling of the rental unit that I had come to regard as my residence. It was not loud. The experience did not possess cinematic qualities. The environment was serene and well-maintained. I was considering withdrawing from the situation. Not in the manner typically portrayed in films. There are no counterfeit passports or exotic destinations involved. I have chosen to move beyond the limited perception of myself that she imposed, transforming from a mere background character into a more prominent presence. I would eliminate the individual she ceased to acknowledge. I would approach it without any abrupt actions. However, I required closure initially. Not originating from her. I preferred not to have that type of negativity circulating in my thoughts once more. I required it from the version of myself that believed love alone could ensure loyalty. I have commenced the writing process. This is not a letter addressed to Lorna, nor is it a dramatic monologue. Rather, it serves as a personal message, a reminder for myself. Is that so? I initiated a new document on my laptop and composed a single sentence to commence. Your experience was unwarranted and unjust. It required 10 minutes for me to compose those 8 words. It was not due to a lack of belief in their words, but rather an underlying concern that I might still be the cause of the situation. I have become uninteresting, expected, overly mild, and excessively lenient. If I had been more spontaneous or less cautious, perhaps she would have remained engaged. However, that was the impression she intended to create. That is what individuals in her position rely on. They exhaust your resources and subsequently hold you accountable for the resulting issues. I dedicated 3 hours to writing, not to express frustration or seek assistance, but to document events with the precision of a historian. I found it necessary to record each instance in which she undermined my dignity in the presence of friends. At every opportunity, she prioritized her phone over engaging with me directly. Each kiss that seemed to be a duty. Each falsehood she conveyed with a smile. By sunrise, I had completed 10 pages of factual content. This is solely for my own benefit. Upon closing the laptop, I experienced an unusual sense of stillness in my chest. Not tranquility precisely, but room. It was as if a window had been opened in a room that had remained sealed for years. On that same morning, I composed and dispatched an email to my supervisor at work. I informed him of my immediate resignation. Provide no explanation and convey no emotion. I did not require references. I was not actively seeking new employment opportunities. It is not available at this time. I subsequently powered down my phone. Not merely a power down. I struck it forcefully, covered it with a towel, and applied pressure with the back of my skillet until the screen shattered into fine particles. It felt significant, as though I was cutting the connection to every unresolved inquiry and every moment of self-doubt. For 3 days, I refrained from engaging in conversation with anyone. I engaged with classic literature, traversed tranquil avenues, and dined in solitude. I ceased monitoring the time. On the 4th day, an unforeseen event occurred. I received a letter, an actual one. Document, envelope, without a return address. The handwriting on the front exhibited a neat and controlled quality, bordering on perfection. Within, a neatly folded sheet containing a single sentence printed in dark ink. You did not inquire about his identity. There is no signature, no explanation, and no additional information provided. I reviewed it 5 times, attempting to interpret the meaning. Was it received from her? From the other individual, through a mutual acquaintance who believed they were acting in my best interest? I was unaware, yet the words adhered to me with the tenacity of wet plaster. You did not inquire about his identity. They were correct. I have not. I preferred to remain uninformed. I still do not believe it would improve the situation. Her actions and the reasoning behind them would remain unchanged. Titles do not rectify treachery. They simply provide an alternative target for your discontent. Nevertheless, I remained unable to dispel the sense of unease. That an individual was aware of my location. It is remarkable that someone has located me even in this place. I took the necessary action available to me. I disposed of the letter by incineration. I made a decision that would alter the course of events significantly. Incinerating the letter did not resolve any issues, yet it did clarify one aspect. My escape was not intended to be a physical one. It was not a matter of disappearing from existence. It involved separating myself from the responsibilities I had been given. The position of the composed, unassuming individual who endured all circumstances. I no longer wished to embody that identity. I had no desire to fulfill any role for her. He is neither her husband, nor her backup option, nor her emotional outlet, nor anything of the sort. However, I had not completed my viewing. It is not available at this time. The aspect of me that still sought answers, or perhaps simply wished to observe the consequences, reactivated like an engine I believed I had turned off. I acquired a new prepaid phone that is not registered under my name and established a new email account. Subsequently, I engaged in an activity that I had not undertaken in several weeks. I conducted a search on her. Social media provided my initial insight. Her profiles remained largely unchanged. Identical curated posts and unoriginal captions, yet she was adorned with a necklace I gifted her 5 years ago in a recent photograph. A finely crafted silver pendant designed in the form of a compass. She once remarked that it served as a reminder to consistently navigate her way back home. The irony unfolded gradually. What unsettled me was the date of the photo captured the evening following our dinner mishap. She shared it with the caption, "Grateful for fresh starts and honest endings." It suggested that she had concluded matters, portraying herself as the one transitioning with poise. I enhanced the image for a closer examination. She was at an elevated lounge. I identified Lanston House, well regarded among the afterwork clientele. Beside her was a hand, the edge of a jacket sleeve visible, a wristwatch adorning the wrist, and a glass of bourbon present. Unidentified, unnamed, simply existing, silently as I had once done. However, I did not feel any anger. I did not sustain any injuries. I found it intriguing that the woman in that photo did not exhibit a smile typical of someone who had experienced joy. She wore a smile that suggested an effort to appear genuinely happy. The performance represented a theater of freedom constructed upon a foundation of shame. Unbeknownst to her, I was observing. Over the course of the following week, I maintained a discreet observation, not to an excessive degree, but sufficiently to understand her identity in my absence, or more accurately, the persona she projected without me. I observed the quotes she shared regarding empowerment mantras, as well as the articles discussing emotional labor and the importance of reclaiming one's voice. I observed her commenting on a friend's post regarding relationships, noting that sometimes we outgrow certain individuals. Outgrow me? No, she left me feeling drained. I exhausted all my patience, dedication, and unwavering hope until only the remnants of a man remained, anticipating something that would never come back. The most unexpected revelation emerged not from her profile, but rather from an unfamiliar account that initially went unrecognized. A gentleman by the name of Taran Delville. The name is unfamiliar, and there are no shared connections. However, the face captured my attention. He appeared somewhat familiar, reminiscent of an individual I may have encountered at one of Lorna's school fundraisers or social mixers. While reviewing the content, I discovered additional images from the classroom conference dinners. A slightly unclear selfie of Lorna and Taran at a bookstore, captioned as a team-building Saturday. 3 weeks prior to our dinner, I encountered a post that left me momentarily stunned. A table arranged for 2 with candles. A bottle of wine that I purchased for our 5th anniversary. Lorna's hand, distinctly recognizable, was positioned on his forearm. A simple caption stated, "When it's not wrong, it doesn't have to be hidden." That was the essence of the message. The individual I had not inquired about, the one referenced in the correspondence. He was not an unfamiliar individual. He was visible the entire time. However, I did not experience the anger I anticipated. There is no fire, only an intense cold that penetrates deeply, reaching to the very core. At that moment, I came to a significant realization. I had not lost her. She had lost my attention. She remains unaware of it at this moment. It will be conveyed through the letter I intend to send her. It was not until the day she discovered something I had left behind. It was only after the individual who took my place demonstrated the price of constructing affection on a foundation of deceit. I anticipated that aspect and chose not to elevate my tone. Only the curtain. I spent a week composing the letter. Not due to a lack of words to express. Conversely, I had an abundance of points to express. However, expressions of this nature should not be crafted in a state of anger, as they may diminish their significance. They must be meticulously shaped over time, akin to a sculpture being chiseled from stone. Truthful, measured, and exact. This correspondence was not intended to plead, to intimidate, or to provide justification. The account presented was one of truth, conveyed not through harshness, but with precision. I aimed to prevent her from experiencing any pain. I aimed for her to experience the profound stillness that had enveloped me for years. The quiet distance between 2 individuals who once connected profoundly and now scarcely exchange breaths. I printed the document, using black ink on high-quality white paper, folded it neatly, and placed it into a standard envelope. No return address, only her name inscribed in my neatest handwriting. I sent it from a nearby town, intentionally selecting a postal drop that I had not utilized previously. Subsequently, I awaited the outcome. The contents of the letter are as follows. Lorna, you previously mentioned that silence in a relationship indicates underlying issues. I was skeptical at the time, but I have come to accept the truth now. For an extended period, I believed that by remaining gentle, you would eventually return. If I remain patient, you will observe. If I remained loyal, you would feel secure enough to cease your flight. However, you were not fleeing from fear. You were pursuing a different objective altogether. I am familiar with Taran. I possess knowledge about Miami. I am aware of the team-building Saturdays and the hotel receipts organized within a folder labeled Always Us. I did not engage in any hacking activities directed towards you. You placed it in a location that was accessible to me. It seems as though there was an inclination to be discovered. This does not constitute a confession. I have no confessions to make. This is not an act of revenge. I have no intention of causing you harm. This is not a request. I do not require an apology or an explanation. This is merely a reflective surface. Please review this. The individual you believe you have overlooked is not absent. He is not broken. He is available. In due time, you will come to realize the true cost of such freedom. I signed it using only my first initial. She would be aware. She would understand precisely what it signified. Furthermore, it is essential to consider what it did not signify. The following day after I sent it, I returned to the house. To refrain from conversation or interaction, solely to retrieve the remaining items I had left behind. A collection of financial documents, a compact box containing childhood photographs, and a hand-carved wooden watch I crafted during my college years. She was not present at the residence. I did not utilize my key. I knocked, waited for a response, and departed when there was none. The lights were extinguished, and the curtains were closed. It resembled a museum of our past existence, preserved, quiet, devoid of life. However, an unusual occurrence took place as I re-emerged onto the porch. An older gentleman, likely in his mid-60s and wearing a veteran's ball cap, called out to me from across the street. "Hello," he inquired, narrowing his eyes at me. "Are you the husband?" I paused for a moment. "Not any more," he said with a slow nod, followed by a quiet murmur. I did not anticipate that outcome. I began to exit, but then I hesitated. Why? He appeared uneasy, almost regretting that he had said anything at all. After a brief pause, he remarked, "You may not be familiar with me, but I have observed much from my front window. Various vehicles consistently parked 2 houses down, occasionally overnight. Was that not your car?" My stomach churned, not from shock, but from validation. He wasn't revealing anything I hadn't already suspected. He was merely enhancing a picture I had already envisioned in muted tones. "Thank you," I replied, uncertain of what else to express. He nodded and lit a cigarette. I remained focused on the empty driveway. I drove away slowly, casting one last glance in the rearview mirror. That's when I noticed her pulling into the driveway alone, her face weary, her shoulders slumped forward as if the weight of something had finally settled on her spine. She retrieved the envelope from the mailbox and examined it closely. As I continued to drive, I refrained from looking back, yet I could envision her expression upon reading the first line. It was neither shock nor anger, but rather a sense of emptiness. Deep down, she understood that she had not only lost me, she had lost a part of herself. I anticipated experiencing a range of emotions upon witnessing her open the letter, perhaps regret, closure, or even a sense of dark satisfaction. However, what I encountered was something entirely different, a profound sense of distance. It was akin to observing someone through a train window as it departs, accompanied by the realization that they will no longer be part of my journey. I was not particularly interested in the subsequent events, yet a part of me felt compelled to know. She did not reach out that night, nor the following morning. However, I was familiar with her. I understood Lorna well enough to recognize that she was not one to express anger, cry, or lose control. Instead, she would approach the situation with a strategic mindset. For her, every situation was a mental challenge. Emotions were a form of currency, and she was always careful not to expend more than she could afford to lose. On the 3rd day, she finally initiated communication with an unexpected message. It arrived via email sent to the new address I had utilized only once for a digital receipt from our joint utility account. Somehow, she had discovered it, or perhaps she had deduced it. The subject line simply stated, "You got your moment." At this moment, I proceeded to open mine. It contained a single paragraph. Detached, precise, and methodical. "You are correct, Corwin. I failed in my commitment. I lacked transparency. However, I was not the sole contributor to our deterioration. Your efforts ceased well before my dishonesty began. This is not an attempt to shift blame. Rather, it is a reminder that silence can also inflict harm. I acknowledge your actions. I will not dispute any points, but it is important to avoid distorting the past and presenting oneself as faultless. You also diminished, albeit in a more subdued manner. I found myself gazing at the screen for an extended period, not due to the pain of her words, but rather because they were expected. That was her approach. Even now, after all that has transpired, she remains unable to relinquish control without justifying her actions. She sought one final revision to the narrative, one last inclusion of her perspective. However, the opportunity had passed. I chose not to respond. There was no necessity for a reply. My silence was not confrontational. It was the most serene gesture I had ever offered her. 2 days later, she reached out to me from a different number. This time, her message carried no resentment, only an inquiry. "What are your intentions regarding the house?" The house. That venue where we held book clubs, celebrated intimate Christmases, debated grocery budgets, and selected paint colors. A repository of memories, some lovely, most subtly stifling. I responded with a concise statement. "It's yours." Not out of generosity, but because I had no desire to keep it. I sought to eliminate any trace of her presence within my home. I aimed to avoid a bedroom that held memories of my pleas for conversation, met only with her indifference. I wished to distance myself from walls that had witnessed joy transform into silence. Furthermore, I had already embarked on the creation of a new life, far removed from the suburbs and the haunting remnants of the past. I was taken aback by what she sent next, a photo of our dining table, the same one from the dinner with her family. This time, however, it was devoid of any presents. In the center sat a vase of wilted flowers, flanked by 2 absent chairs, mine and hers. The caption read, "I tried to have dinner here last night. I gazed at your chair for 10 minutes. You never seemed larger." I reviewed it twice. For the first time in several weeks, I considered responding, but ultimately refrained, as that message was not intended for me. It was directed towards her, a means of dismantling the facade she had diligently maintained. It represented her effort to regain control over the emotional narrative that shifted the moment I exited that restaurant. She was not pursuing reconciliation. Instead, she was in search of dignity, evidence that she had not merely destroyed something valuable for a few fleeting nights with a man who was acutely aware of her vulnerabilities because he had witnessed her create them. And Taran, I had not overlooked him. However, the universe operates on its own schedule. In due course, I would come to realize that their carefully constructed facade was not merely unstable, it was already in the process of disintegration. I had no desire for retribution, it was unnecessary. However, there are instances when truth enacts its own form of justice. When this occurs, it does not arrive with forceful impact but rather seeps in gradually, until even the most meticulously designed exterior starts to decay from within. It commenced with a communication. Not from Lorna, nor from Taran, but from an individual named Bridget. I was seated at a diner one morning, midway through a particularly unremarkable cup of coffee, when my new phone vibrated with an email alert. The subject line read, "You don't know me, but you should." My initial reaction was to discard it. Another internet presence seeking attention. Yet the tone compelled me to engage. I opened it. Concise, straightforward, devoid of pleasantries. "My name is Bridget Delville. I am Taran's wife. I discovered your name linked to a digital payment he made for a hotel in Harrisburg back in April. I initially assumed it was an error. It was not. I am now aware of everything. About Lorna, about the messages, about the second phone. I did not reach out to cast blame. I recognize that you are not the adversary in this situation. My intention was to inform you about the character of the individual in question, as he has deceived not only you and me but all of us." I was taken aback and had to reread the message multiple times. Taran was married, with a wife, a real person who has been enduring her own version of this troubling reality. Similar to my experience, she discovered the truth gradually, piece by piece. I responded promptly, expressing my appreciation and sincerity rather than seeking clarification. Over the following week, Bridget and I communicated via email, taking our time and proceeding with care. She was perceptive and composed, yet it was evident that a torrent of emotions lay just beneath the surface of her words. What stood out to me most was not her pain, but her meticulousness. She had timelines, screenshots, and receipts. It resembled a detailed dossier rather than a breakup. She was aware of Taran's whereabouts on every night he claimed to be working late. She recalled what Lorna wore during their initial hotel meeting. She even identified the scent of cologne Taran had purchased discreetly, having discovered the empty bottle hidden in his sock drawer. One message resonated with me more than the others. "Do you know what I regret the most, Corwin? It's not merely believing his lies, it's the act of defending them." That statement lingered in my mind for days, as it was relevant to both of us. We had supported the wrong individuals for an extended period, losing sight of what it meant to safeguard ourselves. However, Bridget was not done. She had discovered something, a folder that Taran had stored on a flash drive labeled Liabilities. Within the contents were records of every interaction he had with Lorna. Some exchanges were trivial and playful, while others were devoid of warmth, marked by a methodical and strategic tone, reminiscent of two individuals orchestrating an affair akin to a corporate merger. There were even outlines for post-divorce arrangements, including cohabitation, financial consolidation, and the pursuit of a joint teaching position in Oregon. It was at that moment that the realization struck me. Lorna was not merely engaging in infidelity, she was constructing a new existence atop the remnants of my own. However, an unexpected turn of events unfolded. Bridget initiated divorce proceedings and, on the same day, sent me the documentation. She informed Taran that she would be reaching out to the school board regarding the situation, not with the intent to harm him, but to reveal the professional misconduct, the inappropriate allocation of school funds for travel, and the forged receipts. It was more than a scandal. It was a catastrophic event for my career. 2 days later, I received a text from Lorna. There was no greeting or context, just a straightforward question: "What did you do?" I chose not to respond, as I had not engaged in any wrongdoing. The reality spoke for itself. Later that evening, I drove by our former residence. I did not stop, merely slowed down to observe that the porch light was off, the blinds were drawn, and the driveway was vacant. There were no indications of her presence. No evidence of anyone at all. In that instant, I experienced a shift. It wasn't a sense of triumph or resolution, merely the sensation of clean, breathable air. The burden that had resided on my chest for months had lifted. This change was not due to her suffering, but rather because she no longer held influence over me. There were no lingering questions or uncertainties, only the path forward. A path I constructed for myself. Independent and resolute. It is intriguing how recovery does not arrive in a singular, overwhelming surge. One might anticipate a cinematic moment where clarity emerges and the heart feels unburdened once more. However, the process unfolds differently. Healing manifests subtly in parking lots, in quiet moments, and in grocery store aisles where anonymity prevails. It develops gradually, and before you know it, you transition from mere survival to truly living. For me, that moment arrived on a Tuesday. I found myself in line at a downtown coffee shop, a place devoid of music, filled with the aroma of fresh cinnamon and burnt beans. I had been frequenting this establishment more often, not necessarily for the quality of the coffee, but for the tranquility it offered and the anonymity it provided. I appreciate that. The anonymity, the fresh start. A woman stood before me, perhaps in her mid-30s, with long dark curls, dressed in an oversized sweater adorned with small coffee stains on the sleeves. She placed an order for an Americano and accidentally dropped her wallet while attempting to retrieve a $5 bill. I picked it up for her. She smiled and said, "Thanks, stranger." I returned the smile and replied, "You're welcome, stranger." That was the extent of our exchange. However, it was the way she regarded me that stood out. She truly looked at me, not past or through me. There was a sense of curiosity, devoid of any ulterior motive. A brief moment of connection without any expectations. That night, for the first time in months, I slept soundly without interruption. A week later, we encountered one another once more in the same location. This time, she recalled my name, which I had provided to the barista during our previous meeting. She introduced herself as Mira, a freelance photographer originally from Illinois, who had recently relocated to the area following a significant breakup that, in her view, warranted an entire chapter in a cautionary tale. We took a seat at the same table, engaged in a conversation for nearly an hour regarding life, discussed the common misconception of equating comfort with happiness, explored the ease with which one can diminish oneself for another, often without realizing it until it becomes suffocating. It wasn't a date, it was something more profound. It was a genuine human connection. Mira was unaware of my history. I refrained from sharing details about Lorna, Taran, the letters, the motel rooms, and the flash drives filled with secrets. She didn't require that version of me. Perhaps for the first time, I didn't either. I didn't need to embody the man who was betrayed. I didn't need to be the husband who was cast aside. I could simply be Corwin, just a man enjoying the sunlight, sipping bitter coffee, and bringing a smile to a stranger's face. That marked the start of something. Not a love story. Not yet. Just a life. A genuine experience devoid of secrets, tension, or the need for careful navigation. Wara ceased all communication with me, and I did the same. The last update I received was that she had resigned from the school, citing personal restructuring. Taran departed from the area, and his career concluded quietly, much like a fading light bulb. As for me, I secured a position at a smaller logistics company, which offers fewer meetings and a greater sense of purpose. I have relocated to a new apartment featuring creaky floors and a window that provides a view of a park. Each morning, I awaken with the sun. I prepare my own meals. I purchased a bicycle and utilize it regularly. I have rediscovered the ability to appreciate silence, but now it embodies peace, stillness, and freedom. I no longer contemplate her presence. There is no anger, no longing, merely a sense of indifference. This realization has led me to understand that this is the most profound form of closure. If you find yourself in a similar situation, questioning whether you will ever feel complete again, take comfort in knowing that you will. It may not happen all at once, but rather through a series of small moments. With a single breath, a deliberate step, and the recognition of a stranger, you find yourself whole once more.